So on a scale from 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this video? Okay, wait, that is a really untimely question. Won't win me any brownie points at the next work function, nor will it help us, you and me, get to the really juicy tidbits and gossip that we are looking for. Hey, my name is Werner Puchert, and I believe that most of the world's problems are just interesting design challenges in disguise. In this video, we are going to talk a little bit about having meaningful conversations with people, and with that, I'm also going to share with you an interesting tool, or shall I say game, that I recently discovered called Over Coffee. But before we get into the game, of course, I can't lie to you. I spend a lot of time looking at and analyzing and trying to understand the 0 to 10 question in my day job. But we also know, my team and I, that if we want to get to a real meaningful insights, get behind the score, we need to have a conversation with our customers. And for that conversation to happen, we need to really sit and think intentionally, how do we ask the right questions and how do we engage with people in a meaningful way? I don't want to tell everybody, but sometimes I find myself a little bit awkward when it comes to the small talk. So how do you flex your conversation muscles? You go out and you have conversations, of course, but sometimes it's a bit hard to experiment around these conversations, and this is why tools like these or games like these are really interesting. The reason I think that this is particularly useful is that there is some rules in place, and this game, Over Coffee, is no other. There is a couple of rules that you have to adhere to, which in my opinion creates a little bit more of a safe space for you to experiment, to explore, but then also for the people who are playing along to also share in a more meaningful way, because you've created all these rules. They know what to expect. Now, before we get into the rules and how we play this, let me quickly show you what's inside the box. Now, the first thing I'll mention is that this is a really solid, beautifully put together box. The illustrations here, you'll notice them everywhere, done by Cecilia Bevan. Here at the back, just kind of captures also the essence of what this game is about. It's like the perfect excuse to talk about all this stuff we never talk about, but always want to. Inside though, if I open this up, you have the usual suspect, which is the instruction manual, full of the instructions here, step 1 to 9, but then also kind of dips into a couple of tips of how to get started. So they have a couple of icebreakers here, definitions that are being used in the gameplay, but then also a little bit here about the illustration, because what you'll notice is that there's this little interesting, here she is, little bird lady floating around, and what she represents is really just feeling the freedom to share openly with your friends and family, and kind of the freedom that you feel being able to be yourself in your community, which I thought is like a nice consistent theme that comes through. You'll see her here on the manual as well. Inside the box, cards, of course. The first one I'm going to take out here before I tip the box out is just another quick start guide. So if you lose the manual, like I sometimes do, you have this card as a backup. Quickly, let me tip out this box here. Inside the box, you have a set of 35 story cards, and there's all kinds of little prompts here at the back. I'll look into detail on one of these cards in a second. And then, of course, you have the verb cards here in blue, and then you have these single kind of verbs on each of these cards. This is going to help you create the questions that you have to ask. Now, before you ask a question, there needs to be a topic, of course, and this is where the 35 story cards come in. So let's have a closer look at this specific card here. Now, relationships is the main topic. Then there's a smaller prompt next that says, tell us if you are married, single, or are in a relationship. Next, you have 3 options, 3 kind of deeper dive questions around this specific topic. So you have here, in this specific one, say something positive about someone you love. Describe the moment when you first met your spouse or partner. Tell us what you like about being in a relationship, or what you like about being single. So you can see it kind of keeps the options quite open for anybody to kind of build some kind of response or story around this prompt here. And this is true for all 35 of them. I like the idea how they actually gave multiple options for each of the topics here. So for example, you have married and divorce, politics, technology, odd things about, creativity, values, environment, emotions. So you can see there's quite a diverse set of topics to explore here. So let's get into the gameplay. So I want you to bear with me though. I didn't really go out and film people playing the game. I didn't feel comfortable, but I'm not really set up to do that in a really meaningful, professional way. So I'm going to do my best to describe to you how we played the game or how you should be playing the game. Now, the first thing to keep in mind here is that you want at least 2 to 6 people. You don't really want to play this on your own. Hey, but who am I? So first thing I want to quickly unpack here is that you have 2 roles in the round that you play with Over Coffee, and it can take to 30 to 60 minutes, depending on how long you want to play. So the first thing you want to do is you want to find a designated storyteller. So vote who's going to be the first storyteller, and what the storyteller does is he grabs a card from the topic deck, right? So this becomes their kind of prompt for this specific round. So they get the topic of their selection, and I'll get into this now in a second. For the questioners, the people who are left, they each get 2 verb cards, and on the verb cards you have these specific verbs that are going to help these players shape their questions. Now let's get back to the storyteller. Now for the storyteller, this one that I drew over here is stages of life. You have this kind of description at the top below stages of life. It's like, what is the best thing that ever happened to you as a teenager? But then you have the opportunity to answer 3 specific questions here. You can select one of these. Have you had a midlife crisis? If so, describe what happened. Tell us how you feel about growing old and aging. Or has having kids helped you grow as a person? The storyteller takes a moment to select one of these 3 and then proceeds to tell the rest of the players a story based on this original topic, answering one of these questions here. The player on the left who has the verb cards now has the opportunity to ask the storyteller a question. Now, how the player has to do this is that they have to look at their verb cards and then create a question using one of the 2 verbs that they have. And then the storyteller has to answer the question that the player has asked. And then that continues with all the rest of the players. Once each of the players has answered their question, they put the cards that they've used back in the pile, draw a new card, so they always sit with 2 verb cards in their hands. Now, once the round is finished, everybody's had an opportunity to ask at least one question to the storyteller. The next storyteller, the player who's asked the first question in the first round, now becomes the storyteller. And then the game continues. The next player then becomes a questioner again. And that is how straightforward and awesome this gameplay is. If you're a facilitator, you'll probably realize and quickly notice that there's something interesting that's happening here. When the first player asks their question, usually what will happen is that the storyteller will give kind of like a surface level answer. Then the second player will then follow up with another question, and that takes usually the storyteller a little bit deeper in their response. So it's really kind of playing on the whole idea of the 5 whys. So you really start digging deeper, and I've seen this when we actually played the actual game. The other thing that I wanted to point out, which I think is really cool in shaping this kind of conversation muscles, is that for the people asking questions, they only have the option to base their question on one of these 2 verbs. Now, if you think to yourself that sometimes in a conversation, you kind of default to the obvious question. And in this case, if the obvious question doesn't fit one of these 2 verb cards, you really have to think a little bit more carefully about the question you ask, but then also the relevance of the question to the story that has been told, which I think really makes this game super interesting and super relevant for having those deeper and meaningful conversations. There you have it. Overcoffeegames.com is where you go to grab yourself a copy. There's some really cool people there. I had a quick interaction with a lady called Gina, sent me a very nice note. Seems like really awesome, cool people. Awesome game, by the way, and really we did play this. I played it with my family over the summer holidays and was really interested to see how I could get information and stories from my parents, of all people, and I really think that this is a valuable tool to kind of hone in and shape those questioning capabilities that you have. Honestly, haven't used this in a business scenario yet. One thing that I think would be important to kind of consider is that you do create this kind of safe space for people to play this game and share kind of honestly and openly, right? And I do feel though that the skills that you learn here, you can use in your professional life as well. So definitely still relevant. But as I say that, would love to hear if you have any tips and tricks and ways of how you shape your conversation skills, please share them in the comments. And then as always, thank you for watching and catch you in the comments.